let me first ask you, since I've got you here, thoughts on Donald Trump's inauguration and a second Trump term. How will that,
Um,
particularly, how will that, do you think that's going to impact what's going on in Pennsylvania and the work that you do in Harrisburg?
I think you saw a lot of excitement on Monday for sure. I mean, you saw excitement not only just there in Washington, but I think you saw excitement around the country. I think after the election, people made it very clear that they thought we were on the wrong path and we need to go in a different direction. So I think that is what generated the excitement. It'll be fascinating to see what the next 100 days hold. They always talk about the first 100 days.
Well, my
Uh,
goodness, look at what's gone on in the first 2 days.
yes, exactly, exactly. I think what you're seeing there is you're seeing someone who haven't seen it for more than 100 years. Somebody who's coming in that actually has the experience of doing the job already. So there was no learning curve.
Yeah, that's
I think
true.
that's part of why they could just launch right in there and get to work.
Well, yeah, and you make a good point because I've talked to a lot of people that say, and I'm sure you experienced it. There is that very big learning curve, like just not just learning the lay of the land, whether it's in DC or wherever, but how legislation gets done, how caucus meetings get done, and
Right.
what takes place in all of them.
Yeah, I think that takes time to figure all that out. I mean, I think back, a little over, 3.5 years ago when I started. I mean, you're spending the first couple of weeks trying to figure out, where's the restroom, and where do I go for this meeting, and where do I go for that meeting, and it just takes a while to figure out just the basics before you can even figure out, okay, what does this incredibly complicated process look like, and how do I accomplish the goals that I have and the goals that my constituents want me to accomplish? That takes some time. So I think that's why you saw them hit the ground running as fast as they did in the first 2 days. And I think that you're going to see that only accelerate as we go out into the next couple months. The thing that I think everyone still needs to realize, though, is a lot of the goals and things that the president talked about on the campaign trail are going to need congressional approval.
Right.
He can't just say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I mean,
In much the same way, the things that Governor Shapiro says
very,
need your
very, yes,
General Assembly approval.
exactly. And that's a difficult process. It's not one party, the Republican Party does have control in Congress of both sides, but they're not overwhelmingly in control,
Yeah.
especially when you look at the House of Representatives. I think they only have maybe a 2 or 3
Yeah,
seat majority
you peel off
because
three
the Trump
votes.
administration took a couple Republican congressmen.
He even
And,
joked about that.
yes, and so they're going to have to be able to work, across the aisle in terms of solving problems.
Let's hope for that kind of bipartisanship, that kind of cooperation. Let's hope that that takes
Well,
place.
it's always interesting.
Does it take place in Harrisburg?
The beginning of the year, we always talk like that. And, in Harrisburg, we always talk like that. We want to accomplish these goals. We want to accomplish these goals for the people of the Commonwealth. We'll see if that attitude still exists when we get to
Budget time?
May and June,
Yeah.
when we're doing the lion's share of our work. And I'm hopeful that we will continue that effort.
You personally, your style, your demeanor is not as a bomb thrower. Like, I'm going in and I'm going to take
Yeah, it's
names
not.
and bury people and
That's not really in my DNA.
yeah.
My DNA is very much, hey, let's identify a problem and figure out how to fix it. I'm much more programmed to solve problems than I am to create them. I'm always trying to find ways to simplify my life in so many different aspects of it, and that's solving problems is kind of the root of that. And there are plenty of people that work in that building that they find great pleasure in blowing stuff up rather than building it.
Wow.
And those are just the first thing you need to do is identify who all those people are, and then you figure out how to navigate those
Either get them on your side or
landmines.
work around them.
You definitely have to do that. I
Yeah.
mean, you definitely have to be able to sit somebody down and say, hey, you seem to have this issue with whatever we're working on. How can we fix it?
Yeah. All right, one final question before we actually get into skill games, and that is because you've got your Hoster Gebhard insurance company vest on, Donegal Insurance Group. This situation in California, and
Okay.
you could have this conversation about homes on the coastlines
Yes.
that dealt all kinds of hurricane damage, but particularly the devastation with these wildfires, and I mean, whole
Horrible.
neighborhoods
Horrible.
just
Yeah,
gone.
horrible.
From an insurance standpoint, my God, how are these people ever going to be made whole?
I think a lot of them aren't. I think they're never going to be able to, I think, recover from this. One of the interesting things, I just read the article is maybe this weekend, when you think about the fires outside of Malibu, I mean, these are some of the most expensive homes in the country. There are numerous ones that are burned completely to the ground where
Yeah.
people didn't have any insurance. They couldn't get insurance on it. Even though they tried, there was a real estate developer, I forget his name, but he develops real estate all over the country. He's incredibly successful and wealthy. He had a $27 million house and he could only buy $3 million worth of coverage on it. And it burned completely to the ground. So he's basically looking at a $24 million loss that he's never going to get recovery on.
But okay, that guy, the ability to purchase a $27
Right,
million home, and I'm certainly not making light of
right.
his pain or his loss, but he'll be able to recover on the
Sure, but
$24 million
yeah,
loss
I
more
think
so
I
than the
I'm just
grip who
using that.
works at the
Yeah, I'm using
studio.
that as an example because that's what caught everybody's eye. Enough where they wrote a they
But
wrote
could he
about
only get 3 million of insurance because of the risk incurred with
$3 million that he bought was through the state funded program, which was the insurer of last resort when you couldn't buy insurance from anyone else. The two most difficult markets right now in the country are California and Florida.
right,
Both of them are
wildfires, hurricanes?
right. Both of them are extremely challenging. Where in California, they're kind of driven by different factors. Obviously, you have wildfires and earthquake risk and things like that in California and storm risk in Florida. But you also have very different regulatory environments as well. California is extremely difficult. The insurance department in California is extremely difficult. A little over 12 months ago, State Farm, who was the largest insurer in California, pulled out. And one of the reasons they gave when they said we're leaving the state was they couldn't work with the insurance department. The insurance department wouldn't allow them to file for rate increases. They wouldn't even respond to their filings. They would file for a rate increase, and instead of even declining it, the insurance department wouldn't even reply. They would just make it sit there until it expired. And the carriers are saying, hey, we can't make any money here, and we're not going to be here if we don't make any money. Because in the end, I mean, insurance companies are
Our
trying,
business.
they're a business, and they need to make money, or they're going to figure out something else to do. So State Farm pulled out of California. They had, I think it was 19% market share there. That's a huge problem on a state that's already struggling.
1 in 5
Which
homeowners.
is, yes, right, which is why you're seeing the state have to like pour money into this state-run insurance program because there's not enough capacity in the private market to make it all happen. Florida has seen some of the same issues, but it hasn't been a result of Florida's insurance department being difficult to deal with. It has been more an issue of just they aren't sure they can ever charge enough for the exposure that exists. And that's really the challenge that they're seeing.
And the reality is that maybe not for the $24 million guy or the $27 million home, but for the people that want to live in Florida, whether they live on the coastline itself or whether they live 2 blocks back or whatever, should they be allowed to build there? I mean, because it seems like it's a continual every, 3, 4 years, these horrible hurricanes wipe them out. And at some point, I wouldn't blame the insurance company for saying, you know what? You build there, it's buyer beware. Or
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about what some of these issues are. If you want to have that beautiful view because you're right on the water, you need to understand that comes with a cost.
yeah.
Not only is the real estate super expensive, but it comes with a cost in terms of, what could happen to my property. There's been a lot of discussion about California, where did the regulatory environment fail in California because they allowed this development into these areas that were prone to wildfires? I mean, people want to talk about, well, is it climate change? Is that what's driving it? But there's a historical record of this, fires in these areas. And yet,
Coupled with with a utility that there's questions as to whether they shut down the power when these winds came,
right,
if that contributed also
right,
to the fires spreading and everything. Yeah, the wildfires are less of a risk in my view, because if you can get the fire service there, they seem to be able to contain them with not as significant damage as what these hurricanes do, where the storm surge just takes it out.
yeah. I mean, I, I think I would probably be in agreement with that, you know, 3 months ago. But
But
after what we
yeah,
saw, what we're seeing, currently, it's that,
it's
they haven't even been able to get them under control weeks later. I mean, you're seeing that in California. I mean, it is devastation like that's never been seen before in
right.
this country. And I think there's going to have to be some hard conversations about, are are we going to make a decision to rebuild in those areas? I mean, is California going to say, okay, everybody go back and rebuild their house? Because are you setting yourself up for the
Future
same,
loss.
yeah, the same thing to occur in, 10 years, 20 years, 30
Yeah.
years? I mean,
It's definitely multi-pronged, because I don't think it's exclusively forest management. I do think there is some of that factored in as well. It's a multi-pronged thing, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Thank you very much. All right. Here with 48th District State Senator Chris Gebhard to talk about skill gains.
they are the machines that everybody has seen pop up everywhere from your local, restaurant, bar, tavern, VFW type club, to we see them now in convenience stores, gas stations. You'll see them, even in vacant storefronts in strip malls.
Really? But like a little mini skill game lounge?
We have a term for them. We call those like skill parlors.
Yeah.
Instead of a slot parlor, they
Yeah.
call them
Okay.
skill
All right.
parlors.
All right. They used to
They
have a lot of those in the Carolinas.
Yeah. So it is an industry that didn't really exist, 15 years ago, and now has basically exploded, and it's hard to look anywhere where you don't see one of these machines.
Well, when we were setting up this interview, I was telling you that I wanted to find somebody from the skill game manufacturing industry to just explain what it is, a skill game, and how it differs from a slot machine that you would find at Hollywood Casino.
Right.
Because my understanding was they kind of operate on the same sort of internal
They look
workings.
very similar.
And you
Similar.
said you know about it.
Well, I know a little bit about it, as
Enough to be
enough
dangerous.
to be dangerous. Anybody that, when we're trying to solve the problem of regulation in terms of these machines, you have to learn a little bit about them.
All
So
right.
so
So
it's
how
it's
are they
been a
different?
crash course for me. Had chaired the committee that oversaw the gaming industry. I had chaired it for the last 2 years, and it is an issue that we've been wrestling with. So it's been a crash course for me, understanding and learning what these machines are. And what they are is they very much look like a slot machine. They have portions of them that operate just like a slot machine, but then they also have sections that you can choose to play. The player can kind of choose one or the other, where they can play different types of games on them. And one of those is what the courts have deemed to be skill-based games. And some examples of those would be, they have memory tests. They'll display a pattern of colors, and then you have to remember what that pattern looked
Hmm.
like. You can do things like that. You can do, I think they have some other ones where you're matching pictures and doing things like that. So kind of memory test type games.
So it's not like what the kids play with shooters and,
No, no, not a,
gangsters
yes,
and
not
stuff like
not
that.
not at all. Not
Okay,
not
all
like a,
right.
not like a video game.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, not like a video
So it's
game.
not like a video game. A part of the machine you're saying has the slot machine element.
It
So
does.
things are rotating and they,
Some, yes, they look very much like that.
okay. So how is that not a slot machine? Just because it has the color test?
Just because it has the color test on it. And that's been the ruling of the court. The courts have, and this has gone all the way up to the Commonwealth Court. So the second highest court in the state of Pennsylvania has ruled that these machines, because they have that extra section in them, are not pure gaming machines, are not, do not fall underneath the definition of what we define as a slot machine in Title IV, which is the Gaming Act that goes back to 2004. So they fall outside of that, which is why you've been able to see them proliferate throughout the Commonwealth in all these different places. The Gaming Act is very clear. Those slot machines are not allowed to be anywhere else but on a casino floor. And the only time that you can get outside of that definition is you have what they call video gaming terminals, VGTs for short.
Right.
You'll see those in truck stops, like in a Rudders or a
Love's truck stop.
truck stop. You'll see those. That was brought online. That change was brought online, I believe, 2017, when they did the last revamp of the Gaming Act that we've done in the Commonwealth.
So at Love's truck stop, you're seeing the VGT, the video gaming terminal, that has half slot machine and the color game?
No, those are true slot machines. When you go to a truck stop, those are true slot machines. There is no difference between the game that you'll see at a Rudders truck stop and the game you'll see on the casino floor at Hollywood Casino up in Grand.
So how do they get away with that?
Because in 2017, they did a small expansion of the Gaming Act where they allowed truck stops to put those machines in.
Under license?
Under license. They have to go through all of the background check qualification, all of the monitoring that happens at casinos. They have to plug into the same system that the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board runs, and they monitor everything. And it works basically the same way as a casino works, where they get taxed and controlled by that whole process under what the law has laid out for them.
So it's like a pop-up casino.
It's a pop-up casino. They're very small. I mean, there's limitations on how many machines they can have.
And I imagine they have to have somebody making sure that the players are at least 21,
Yes,
which
correct.
of course you have to be at
I mean,
the casinos.
Yes, they have to be in a entirely separate room. They can't just be sitting out on the open, floor of the truck stop. I mean, there's a lot of qualifications that they need to meet to be able to do that. They have to sell 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel a month. They have to average that. They have to have, I don't know the exact number, but they have to have a certain number of truck parking places.
Okay.
That's how they qualify.
And
they're allowed to do that.
And I'm assuming nobody in Harrisburg has a problem with this.
No,
because it has been governed, it has been it's regulated. There,
Right.
There's hard and fast rules.
Yes, correct.
As to what
Correct.
can happen at these truck stops.
I mean, and it is an organized process. I mean, at the end of every day, the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board can tell you exactly how much money was gambled on those machines and what the win percentage was.
Okay. All right. I was at a Sunoco gas station convenience store. They have a Subway, and my daughter loves that Subway. She loves the Subway sandwiches. And so we're in there, and they've got these skill games, and I plunked $5 in. I lost it in probably 90 seconds because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just hitting buttons,
Right.
and they were like, you lose.
Yeah.
So Sunoco Subway store had, I bet you, 6, 7 of these skill game machines in there. If they wanted to put 25 in, could they put 25 in?
Well, right now, there's no regulation. There's no framework around how these things are operating. So if they wanted to put 25 in, they could put 25 in. And that is a good example of what the issue is, and the issue that we're currently wrestling with is there's no guardrails around any of this. There's no control on these machines. Are we making sure that someone is of legal age to play them? Are we controlling people that might have a gambling addiction? They may even be on the excluded list from a casino in
Right.
Pennsylvania. There's no control over that. There's no control to keep them off of these machines because they're so easy. You can just literally go in there, take $5 out, and put it on there. I bet no one asked you, hey, can we see your ID to make sure you're 21 years
They
old?
were making our sandwiches.
Exactly.
They weren't concerned
Exactly. And
about
that and
that.
and that that is some of the things that have created a large part of the concern that we have in Harrisburg about how these machines are being operated on. Some of the other things are we've seen is they've become public safety hazards. And I say that meaning it's very much cash business. There's a lot of cash floating around on these things. So you've seen crime, pop up around them. One of the things that's interesting is the mayor of Philadelphia has taken a real interest in this issue because she has said, we are having real crime issues associated with where these machines are. We've seen how they are very attractive to organized crime because they aren't monitored, no one's controlling them. They are very much a cash business. So if you think about, organized crime's efforts to do money laundering, things like that, they make it very easy for that. Those are the things that I think we need to control.
Well, had I known what I was doing on that machine and I won, quote unquote, what does it do? Does it give me a some sort of a voucher and then I go up to the subway register and I get my money?
It can work a lot of different ways. There is a legitimate side to this industry, people that are straight shooters, people that are doing it right, people that, have machines that work fairly and they're really skilled machines. And then you have more of a shady side of this industry where you have folks that have basically just gone and bought a slot machine that casinos get rid of. They turn their machines over on their floors quite frequently, and these machines get out into the market. They buy these machines, they put skill stickers on the side of them, and they're putting them in these
Oh
places.
my goodness.
So we call those regulated unlicensed machines on there that don't even comply with what the Commonwealth Court has defined as being a skill machine. They aren't even complying with that, and they don't care because they're seeing that without any regulation, we have almost no enforcement. And so it creates an environment where they can do whatever they want.
I know that the state police has the Bureau of Gaming Enforcement, and typically those troopers that are assigned to the BGE are at the casinos.
Correct.
Do they have permission that they could go into the stores and if there was one of these, real slot machines with the stickers on it saying, "Oh no, we're a skill
Well,
game,"
that's one of the
they could bust
that
them?
that's one of the challenges that we're currently facing is it's not as clear as yes or no.
Okay. Could any police officer for that matter?
Part of where these court cases have come from is they came from various counties or mostly driven by the state police and the attorney general who had deemed them to be violations of the state law, and they said you can't have these gaming machines out. The gaming act's very clear, they can be either in a truck stop or on a casino floor. And so the attorney general used the state police to go and take some of these machines, and they confiscated them. And then when the lawsuits came from that, that's what has really prompted this whole process of the court system saying, okay, now we're saying there's a difference in the definition here, and the legislature needs to clean this up.
I agreed. But number two, how did it even get past you guys? And I'm using that for the whole of the General Assembly. Because even if everybody was a complete straight up operator, legitimate, truly with skill games, with the color tests and the memory tests and all of that, there is so much potential tax revenue to be claimed. How did it get past you guys?
Well, this has been an issue that's been percolating for years and years, much longer than predates me for sure. And I think what you're seeing when you have a very challenging issue like this one is, how difficult it is to find a solution. You have competing industries in this world. It's amazing to me. When you get the job to chair the committee that oversees gaming, you learn a lot and you learn who the big players are in it. The casino industry in Pennsylvania has been very successful, and they're a very big industry. They, for years, were absolutely opposed to these machines, as you could
Yeah.
expect. I mean,
Yeah.
these are direct competitors of theirs. These are people that had to pay $50 million a pop to get a casino license in Pennsylvania. Huge, that's a big investment. You're seeing now these people have come in on the skill side and they haven't had to pay $50 million to do this. They've kind of figured out a, lack of a better term, loophole in the law that they've been able to capitalize on. And so you have all these folks that are in the casino industry that wanted to ban them forever. When I first started, they came to me and they said, you need to ban them all. But to me, and this isn't just my attitude, I think it's the overwhelming attitude of the General Assembly, was it's too late for that. The genie is out of the bottle.
Right.
There's too many of these machines. You saw how valuable they were through the pandemic, supporting restaurants, supporting private clubs with a revenue stream they never had before and they needed. Like, if you think about how those businesses suffered so much through the pandemic, these machines saved a lot of them. So you had great support for keeping them.
Okay.
Even though the casino industry was like, you need to get rid of these.
So has the casino industry moderated their view to where, all right, we're not going to ban them, they're not going to go the way of the dinosaur, but there needs to be a regulatory framework and there needs to be licensing
It took a lot of effort on my part, a lot of meetings on my
to
part
get to that?
with to get them, kind of dragging them, kicking and screaming, as they say, to get to the point of, we're not going to ban them, but we certainly need to tax and regulate them.
Is the genie out of the bottle to where you can now even develop a regulatory framework and a licensing program with so many that are already out there at the subways and at all the other stores?
Well, that's what we're going to find out. The memo that we introduced last week is that is going to be that effort. I mean, it is going to be our effort to finally bring this issue to a head and see what kind of solution we can find.
Now you are introducing that. The co-sponsorship is you, along with Senator Kim Ward and Senator Joe Pittman, Senator Rosemary Brown.
Yes, correct. The four of us are Republicans.
You're all
So
Republicans.
we're all Republicans.
Okay.
And where this came from is, we've been working on this issue for 2 years.
Is there any Democrats who support what you're doing?
They have been part of the conversation for sure. But a lot of times what we have found is, as we've tried to engage them and say, hey, we would like you to participate in it, a lot of the way that building works is they kind of say, when we were going to the House Democrats, because I'm a big believer that the most efficient way to do something is to negotiate the whole thing up front, get all the pieces in place, get all the stakeholders on board, and get buy-in from both sides of the aisle in the General Assembly, and then you run the bill, because then you've already done the heavy lifting.
Right.
You already have the agreement, and then you aren't going to run into as many roadblocks as you're trying to get to the finish line. We've been trying to do that, but what you find a lot of times, and we found this as we were discussing it with the House Democrats, was that they had kind of said to us, we haven't given this, they'll say, we haven't given this a whole lot of thought. You guys have obviously done all of the work on this. You've met with everybody. You've put the hours of work into it. Why don't you just send us something? Because they don't want to show their cards. They don't want you to know what they're thinking. But what has really happened in the last 6 months is we've had some issues that have popped up, most notably the issue with transit. So when we talk about trains in Pennsylvania, you talk about SEPTA down in Philadelphia, they are having major financial issues. We just saw the governor take $100 and some million from the transportation fund. And when I say transportation, what we're really talking about is money that goes to repair bridges and roads.
Mm-hmm.
He took $100 and some million from the transportation fund and loaned it to SEPTA because they needed the money to stave off having to take a substantial rate increase, and they were going to have to close some of their routes and things like that. So we have this issue now where they need some more money. They're currently, under their model, they're broke. And what happened was, they came to the Senate Republicans and they said, we need this in the budget. And we said, we're not willing to do that. We're not willing, we already have major financial restraints in our current budget. We're currently running a structural deficit. So we're not willing to just kick in and give what has been a money pit organization that is SEPTA. We're not willing to give them $200 million just to round those numbers off. And what we did say is we said, we are willing to have that conversation if we can find a way to create new revenue. Then we can have that conversation. We can help solve that problem, but we need to find where that money is going to come from. And we said, this is an issue we've been trying to have conversations about. The skill game industry has come to us and said they'd like to get taxed and regulated and legitimized. Why don't we use that to find that revenue? And suddenly we had the Democrats come to us and they said, this is an interesting issue that we want to get done. The governor has been like, this is an issue that we should be solving.
Are Senate Democrats aligning with the House Democrats, or are they aligning more with just the general idea that we need to get this done?
I think they're aligned with the general idea that we need to get this done, because SEPTA, that is the train system that runs around Philadelphia, and then it also has some branches off.
Sure.
We do things in Allegheny County and things like that. But who represents those areas? They tend to be very Democrat heavy areas from a representation standpoint. So, Vince Hughes, who's the appropriations chair in the Democrat caucus in the Senate, he's from Philadelphia. He very much is interested in it. You have Matt Bradford, who's the majority leader in the House. He's a Democrat who represents Montgomery County, very much interested in solving this problem. SEPTA is very important to both of them. And the governor is from Montgomery County, also a heavy SEPTA area. So it is an issue that we have found some common ground. You want to solve this problem, we want to solve this other problem. We can do it together.
So are you saying that if you get this done with tax revenue coming back to the state, it's going to be dedicated exclusively to SEPTA?
We're not going to build that into the law. The law is basically going to say the revenue is going to go into the general fund, which I think is smart. I think you can get yourself into real trouble when you start saying, well, the money from this is going to always go to this, whatever that issue might be. You get yourself into trouble. But
well, I was only thinking in terms of like the Pennsylvania lottery, which is dedicated to older Pennsylvanians, the funding.
Right, a portion of it is, yes.
Yeah.
Then so some of it does go into the general fund too. But what you want to do is you got to be careful about handcuffing yourself, because you don't know what the future may hold. And gosh darn it, changing this stuff is really, really hard. So the last thing you want to do is have to pass a piece of legislation because you handcuffed yourself, 10 years ago on where some of this might go.
So you said that the skill game industry, they want regulation, they want licensure?
They have come to us and they've said, we want this to happen. Because if we backtrack to where I gave you the two examples, there's kind of two sides of this industry. There's the shady side and there's the sunshine side. The guys in the sunshine, they want a legitimate industry. They want to run legitimate businesses. They want this to happen, and they want it to happen the right way. They want this to happen because if we create the right regulatory environment, it eliminates all those bad guys. It eliminates the guys that shouldn't be in the industry, the guys that are, running machines that might have a payout. They might be set to pay out 30%. That's the thing with the people. I think people don't understand. Like a slot machine, you can program it to pay out a certain percentage. You know how much it's going to pay out. The Gaming Act requires every slot machine to have at least an 85% payout number. They're higher than that. If you talk to the casino folks, they'll say, well, everybody would, the general public figures out whose machines pay out the best.
The loose slots.
The loose ones, right. And so they figure that out. So they're all higher than the 85%, but there is a floor set in the law because you want that. Why would you certainly don't want people going into a casino and playing a game that they think they have a chance to win, that they have almost no chance of winning. That'd be terrible. You certainly don't want that. Right now, there are some of these machines floating around in the Commonwealth, in that gas station. Maybe that's why you lost your $5. Maybe you were
I literally had no idea what I was doing.
Maybe you were playing a machine that was really only going to pay back 10% of the time.
All right, so I did ask you, and you said we'll come back to that. So how does a player get their winnings from a skill game presently?
So what I see most commonly, like if you go into a private club, VFW, there'll be the machine will print out a voucher, And now they take the voucher and there's basically like a ATM type machine where they feed the voucher in and it'll spit out the cash.
Oh, okay. So the
That
guy behind
that
the
was a
bar
great
isn't
well, that
isn't
was a great change because years ago they used to, they were going from the machine, they were going to the bars, and then the bars had to keep all this cash on hand.
right.
That that's where those issues from the crime standpoint were really becoming major problems, was because all this cash was floating around. Now they have payout machines where they
Yeah.
can put they put their voucher in and it spits out the cash.
So what are your feelings as to success with this legislation?
Every time I feel like we have a good positive path forward,
You
the rug,
realize why you're not a California psychic?
yes, the rug tends to get pulled out from underneath us. I did think that last June we were going to make significant progress on this and maybe take our swing at the plate. Every time I thought that last fall was when we saw this SEPTA issue really percolate. I thought this is our chance. We're going to get it done. But, then once you hear, something always happens where you can't do it. I mean, last fall they basically said, we're not running anything of any significance because there's kind of an important election coming up in November. And we're not interested in giving anybody a chance to win. It's one of the things that frustrates me the most. It's like you're in a building where you look around and everybody has the attitude that no one's allowed to win. No one can win. You can't accomplish a goal so that they can go home and tell everybody at home, hey, I got this done. And then they get reelected. It's because everybody's running against each other.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because that's not what the people of the Commonwealth want. They want us to do something.
And how will that get fixed? 2 words.
2 words?
Term limit.
A lot of people think that. They think the term limits would solve that. And I used to probably think the same thing. But after getting there, I'm not so sure term limits would solve it. In fact, I think the term limits actually can make things a little bit worse. And here's why. We talked about the learning curve that it takes to figure out how this all works. It takes a while to do that. If you put term limits in, you actually can take people that actually know what they're doing and can be effective, and you're forcing them out.
Unfortunately, though, human nature, in my humble opinion, people start believing that they are in a monarchy and that this office is mine until I choose not to have it anymore. And that's, and with incumbency comes great power. And so it tends to feed itself. You've got incumbents who already have a lot of advantage every election cycle. Very rarely is an incumbent booted out unless they've, really done something
We
bad.
just saw that. We saw that in November. There was only one incumbent that lost in the entire General Assembly. 253 seats, only one incumbent lost. It was Senator Jimmy Dillon lost. He was a Democrat from Northeast Philadelphia, and he lost to Joe Picozzi, who is a super spunky 29-year-old. Makes me feel old as heck when I see him. Great young man, worked his tail off, but that was the only incumbent that lost. So I certainly see that. I don't know if term limits changes that.
Well, I'm not saying you have to necessarily make it like the presidency where it's 2 and done.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, maybe 6 terms in the House, which is 12 years.
I think that's a decent amount of time to be there. I mean, people have always asked me that. Well, how long are you going to be there? Did you set a limit on how long you'll be there? And I said, the biggest term limit I'm going to have is when my wife tells me it's time to go. And
because she's the president.
She's the boss. She's not the president. She's the queen of our household. And when she says it's time to go, it's time to go.
Well, but in all seriousness, so this has a fair to middling chance of passing this legislative session. You got 2 years.
I think it's going to be one of our priorities.
Okay.
Here's how you know it's going to be one of our priorities. You had read the names off there. I'm one of the prime sponsors of this bill. I was the chairman of the committee. The reason I'm first is because I'm the one who put all this together over the last 2 years. But the other 3 that we have, Kim Ward is the president pro tem. She's
Right.
the most important, powerful person in the Senate. She is elected by all of us to be the boss. Joe Pittman is the majority leader.
Yeah.
He is the second most important person in the Senate. And Rosemary Brown is the new chairman of the committee that oversees gaming.
So you're the former chair, she's
I'm
the
the
new
former
chair.
chair, she's the new chair. So we have the four people that have been involved or will be involved in this issue going forward as the prime sponsors of this bill. That was intentional. And it was intentional because we want the world to know this is a priority of ours. We want to get this done. We need to get this done. There are so many issues surrounding this industry that we need to solve, and so we need to finally bring this to a head and do something. My belief is we're going to take our shot. We're going to take our shot, and we're going to take our shot this spring. I think the solution may not come till we get to the budget because it's amazing. We don't actually want to cross things off our to-do list until we get that last week in June. We start passing, 30 bills a day because we haven't passed anything for the last 2 months.
Well, I'm encouraged by that. And I think, as you have laid it out here, this is certainly an issue that has to be addressed.
I agree. And it is a major lift. I mean, as we would say in the building, it is a major Herculean lift to get this to pass because there are so many, interested parties in how it's going to come out.
I know the casino industry has a big lobby. Does the skill game industry have a big lobby?
Huge.
Okay.
Yeah, very big.
Do the shady skill gamers have a lobby?
Well, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. They're very influential. And that's where you see a lot of what the issues are. I mean, there have been bills in the last session. There were bills introduced that ran the whole gamut. There were bills introduced that wanted to ban them. And there's bills introduced that want to tax them at 16% and put them everywhere. There's bills that run the spectrum of the whole thing.
I neglected to ask this one question. Right now, just as they currently stand, can anybody play them, or is there supposedly a 21-year-old age floor?
It's not a clear answer. That's part of the problem. There's no clear answer there. I mean, you should be 18. Like if you think about, you can't play the lottery. You can't go buy a lottery ticket, a scratch-off lottery ticket unless you're 18. So you could say, well, the framework should be 18. You can't go in a casino unless you're 21.
Right.
And so there's no clear line about what applies to what when we're talking about these machines.
So literally right now, my 17-year-old could go to Subway and order herself a sandwich and sit down and play that machine while it's being made.
Well, I'm pretty sure the people that are making the sandwich aren't going to turn around and go, hey, all right, how old are you? Are you 18?
But do they even have any sort of guideline? Are they having any sort of guideline as to what is allowable in terms of the player's age?
I think it's 18. I think you have to be 18.
Oh, all right.
That tends to be the framework in Pennsylvania is you got to be 18. You got to be 18 to play the lottery. You got to be 18 to do a lot of things.
Okay.
So I think it would be 18. But the problem is that's not very clear. And that's what the issue is.
Okay. Man, there are a lot of issues. This thing is fraught with issues.
It is.
All right, Hercules, get to it.
It is one enormous challenge. But that's the fun. That's what I think is fun. I think, if I'm going to spend my time, being there, I want to accomplish something important. We want to accomplish great things, and solving this problem would be a great thing. And I would take great pride in playing a part in finding a solution to this. That's why I decided to do this job. That's why I went there. And there's plenty of other things that are demanding of my time. But I spend a lot of time doing this because I want to accomplish things. I want to be able to leave, this job and look back and say, we were able to make the Commonwealth a better place.
Well, you have already, in your short time, had some very significant pieces of legislation passed that have done exactly that. You had a very important bill related to dispensaries, medical marijuana dispensaries. You have accomplished that, but there's more to do, and
there's more to do. I don't like to be bored. I like challenges. I certainly have found myself in the middle of a lot of these issues. A lot of people joke with me. They said, you have developed a very quick reputation as a person that is a good negotiator, person that we can use as a good negotiator. They've put me in the middle of a lot of these issues, and I don't think it's by chance.
And what's your process? Learning all you can, doing a deep dive on the information so that you go in there,
Absolutely, yes.
not as a blank canvas, rather, but somebody who's
And I think, one, you need to understand the issue, and you need to understand not only the issue from a 10,000-foot view, but you need to understand the issue in terms of how it works on the street. At the street level.
right.
What are the positives of these machines? There are a tremendous amount of positives of these machines. They have been lifelines to a lot of these small businesses. But what are the challenges? There may be great positives, but there's also been a lot of negatives. You need to understand, how are they going to fit in the overall framework of the gaming industry in Pennsylvania. I mean, Pennsylvania generates over $2 billion in tax revenue from the gaming industry. Those are huge numbers that we need. Our budget's $47 billion. $2 billion is a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to protect that. I mean, that's something that is an investment, that is an asset of ours. That revenue stream that we get is an asset of ours. If we're going to provide the services the Commonwealth provides, we need the revenue to be able to do that. And you have to protect that. So you can't just have an industry come in, not have any rules apply to it, while you have another industry that is probably the most regulated industry in the Commonwealth, which would be gaming. And you have these folks that are currently unregulated.
Have you had fellow lawmakers come to you and say, hey, Chris, I would like you to, get involved with this issue because I think you're such a good negotiator and you could help out?
I have had people that have come to me and they have said,
will you take a look at this?
Yes. One of the issues right now is should we legalize marijuana? And I have had Democrats from the House and Democrats from the Senate have come to me and said, you got to help us get this done. And I look at them and I go, what are you guys talking about? I mean, I'm not exactly like, out there, John Fetterman, waving my marijuana flag all over the place. But that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in the fact that
your personality.
Yeah, I think and I take it as a compliment. I think it's a great compliment that people said, you are open and honest and want to have reasonable conversations, and you want to find common ground to make something happen that's positive.
Are you a guy who wants to kind of keep a scorecard? I got this many wins. Oh, I took a hit here.
Not really.
Or are you just a guy who wants to fix things and get it done?
I always tell people, I'm not the guy that wants to go stand up in the room and say, look at me, look at what, I did this, I did that. I've actually had folks on our team say the same thing. They go, you never use the word I. Our governor is famous. He uses the word I a lot.
Yeah.
He's, I did this, I did that. One of the greatest things that I've accomplished is we got the financial literacy requirement into the high school curriculum. The governor literally the following year said, I was able to get financial literacy in there. And it's like, wait a second.
Well, didn't that chap you a little bit?
Well, a little bit. I mean, that chap, when someone takes credit for something else you did, that always is going to rub you a little bit the wrong way. But to me, I don't need to be the person that stands up there and goes, I did it. I'll stand at the podium. I don't need to do that. I'm happy to stand in the back of the room and know deep down, hey, I was an integral part in doing this. And it's something that's good. It's probably a weakness of mine.
No, that's not what it is.
Well, in the political world,
I know exactly what it is. What it is, I want to tell you what it is by asking you this question. Have you had people come to you say, I'd like you to run for Congress. I'd like you to run for Senate.
Yes.
U.S. Senate.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Do you harbor those aspirations?
Not really.
That's what it is.
Not really.
You're not a guy, Mark Singal, former lieutenant governor.
No one's ever asked me to run for the U.S. Senate.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
But I have had people that go, you should be in Congress. I've had people that say, you should run for governor. And I look at them and I laugh. I'm like, listen, I'm barely married to my wife now.
It's back to your wife. But that's what it is. When I interviewed Lieutenant Governor Mark Singal, we were talking about Shapiro because it was at the time that Vice President Harris hadn't yet made her decision.
Right.
And he was in the mix, really heavy in the mix. He said to me, I've known Josh for decades. Josh Shapiro has been running for president since he was 12 years old.
I absolutely agree.
And so that's what it is. You're not, at least what you're telling me now is you're not running for anything else. Maybe, kind of, sort of.
So something would have to change greatly for me to change.
But all of
I feel like I am in the right position at the right time to accomplish goals that I think are important.
the people that keep the scorecard, including our governor, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, if you want to be president, God bless you. You might want to go have a mental evaluation, but God bless you. But all of those people with that scorecard, it's because they want to parlay that to the next
Well, I think
higher
so.
office.
Very much so.
And so that's the difference between you and them. That's why you're content to stand in the back
Yeah.
and just know that you had a hand in
Yeah.
crafting something.
I think it's just my personality too. It's just who I am. I tend not to be a rah-rah, stand, out there waving my pom-poms in the front. I tend to be just, hey, let's roll up our sleeves and go do something and get it done.
Now,
And
what
that's
if
a good thing.
the aforementioned wife said, Chris, I think you should run for higher office. You'd be
You
great.
obviously don't know.
You'd be great.
You obviously don't know my wife.
I don't. I haven't had the pleasure.
Although I think she might be your daughter's guidance.
She is.
Yes.
She is. We talked about that. But if she said that, would that be a changing factor?
I think so many things would have to change in my life. People have talked, would you want to go to Congress? And I look at it like, one, my two boys are still pretty young. They are 13 and 16. I'm already stretched pretty thin. I have a career, in the insurance business, and I'm doing the Senate job as well. I'm already stretched pretty thin. If you go to Congress, you have to literally go to Washington all the time. My commute now is 45 minutes when I got to go to Harrisburg. I can do that. Washington is a whole other story, 2.5 hours back and forth. You have a district, our district that Congressman Muser represents, runs from Lebanon County all the way to the New York border.
Yeah, something's got to be done about that.
Yes, I mean, that's a lot of windshield time that I wouldn't be looking forward to. And so
you could get your private pilot's license,
I guess,
and you could just
I guess. But
different places.
That idea doesn't fit in my current life. So when people ask me all that, I said, I'm not interested in it.
It'd only be a 45-minute commute to the governor's mansion.
It would only be that, yes.
But
then I'd have to be the governor.
But think about it. Think of all that you could get done with that get done attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, our current governor says he has a GSD, a get stuff done. Yes.
Yeah.
He likes to say that.
Yeah. I wish we actually could put a couple things on that list. That would be a great thing. We can start with this bill.
Okay.
We can start with this bill. We can put it on the list, and I'm happy to stand next to him while he signs it and says I got the toughest issue in the Commonwealth taken care of, and I'm glad that we could GSD this for everybody in the state.
See, you've already got the mantra down. You got the whole thing going on. Senator Chris Gebhard, thank you so much. Thank you, honestly, for explaining skill games. That's a whole territory I knew nothing about, clearly.
Well,
but now I want to kind of play one of those memory games. I love those memory games. But do you have to play the other part first before you get to the memory?
You can go and play just the memory game.
Yeah. I think I like that.
Yeah. I mean, I've played the memory part. It's really slow and really monotonous. And I honestly think it's designed so that people don't want to play it.
And they'll go over to the slot side.
Go over play the other side.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for having me.